Hello everyone and welcome to the Fremont Debate Academy. In this video, we're going to be covering flowing, in other words, how to keep track of a debate. Like water, never stop flowing in your rounds. Keep in mind that regardless of what happens or whether you think you're winning or losing, you should always be flowing during every single speech. First, an introduction to flowing. A quick question to start off. Why do we take notes in school? Pause this video and write down some ideas you have in a Google Doc or on a piece of paper in front of you. Then, when you're ready, unpause the video. Ready? Well, a couple of things that spring to mind are it helps you keep track of what the teacher's saying. If you have something to refer to after class, for example, while doing your homework, you can share your notes with a friend, and perhaps most importantly, it helps you to remember the information that you're listening to. Now, all of those reasons also apply to why we flow during a debate. It's essentially a format of note-taking that's specific to debate. So again, flowing is a way to take notes in debate, and it's a way to remember everything that your opponent says and make it easy to address those points. Your speeches are also a lot more organized when you have something to reference. When you have a piece of paper that says, my opponent said X, Y, and Z, that gives you more confidence that you're responding to the right things. A flow sheet is also a good way to track what your opponents are saying for future reference and to organize your speech. Now, instead of frantically searching around your papers for what your opponent said, you can easily say, my opponent said A, B, and C, and in response to that, X, Y, and Z. You're not just writing notes on a piece of paper or, for example, something in paragraph form, but rather you're using a specific format that has separate subsections, and this format is unique to debate. Let's look at a few examples of flows. Now, this is what we call a flow sheet. It's just a blank piece of paper with 6 columns on them. Now, each column is going to represent a different speech. In MSPDP, we have prop, then op, then prop, then 2 opposition speeches ending off on a proposition speech. And each column is representing a different speech here. So under the proposition 1 column, you're going to write down everything that the first proposition speaker says, from the definition to the background to the different assertions and the following contentions. Now you're going to make sure that you write out the contentions in the Arisi format. List out the specific assertion, reasoning, evidence, sources, and impacts that your opponents are using. Then you're going to write everything that the op-1 speaker says. You're going to write the refutes they said to the proposition's points, as well as the individual points the op brought up. Now here we use an arrow to connotate a refute. The proposition's first point has a refute listed here, and you know it's a refute to the first point because there's an arrow pointing to it. Then you're going to do the same thing to the proposition's second speaker. You're going to write the counter refutes to the refute to the first point. In other words, the prop 2 speaker is explaining why the point is still valid and why this refute is flawed. And again, you know which refute it's counter-refuting because of these arrows. Then the proposition's second speaker is going to refute the points that opposition 1 brought up, and finally they're going to bring up their own points. Then the same thing happens for opposition 2. They're going to counter-refute, they're going to refute, and they're going to bring up their own points. Now keep in mind that for the third speakers, they have different roles from the first and second speakers. If you're still a bit confused on this, feel free to check out the role of the third speaker videos. But in the third speech, you're going to be summarizing all of your side's points, summarizing the refutes, and responding to each point individually. So in response to the first point blank, second point blank, third point blank, and so on and so forth. Finally, the third speakers are going to give a 2-word analysis, which you'll record at the bottom of their columns. Based on how the paper flow looks, how do you think the online flow will look? Will there be any major differences? Well, the main difference is online, you'll be using a spreadsheet, and I'd recommend using Google Sheets for this. So in the first column, you're going to list all the propositions points. The second column, you're going to list the refutes to the proposition's points, as well as the opposition's own points. The third column, you're going to list the counter-refutes, refutes, and the prop 2's points, and so on and so forth. So effectively, it does the same job as the paper flow, but the only difference is each individual row represents a specific series of points, right? So let's say the first point is about creating jobs. Prop 1 is going to say that making more jobs. Op 1 is saying, actually, you're not making jobs, rather you're taking away other jobs. Prop 2 is going to say, well, that refute is invalid because the source you used was from the 1800s, and so on and so forth. Each row is going to be following the same topic area. Let's go through a couple of tips for flowing. So what do you think we should keep in mind while flowing after looking through those flow sheets? What do you think some good practices to keep in mind might be? Well, the first thing to keep in mind is arrows. Arrows show refutes to points. They make sure you know what argument you're specifically responding to and the order that you're going in. This way, you can easily point to a specific point your opponents brought up. For example, that they'll create more jobs and respond to them in kind. For example, in response to the evidence my opponents brought up in the second point, this evidence isn't valid because that source is incorrect or something along those lines. With those specific arrows, you can easily point to what part of your opponent's case you're responding to, and that also allows the judge to know that you're keeping track of the debate and are engaged with what your opponents are saying. This helps keep your speech organized and makes it easier for the judge to vote for you. So again, the arrows are making it clear what's being refuted and where the refute is being written down. The second point that the Proposition 2 speaker brought up is being refuted over here. Circles. So circles are meant to mark unrefuted points and emphasize your arguments. If you think there's anything really big that's going to make or break the debate, you're going to use a circle for it. If your opponents don't respond to a point, circle it because that's massive. That's a key piece of evidence that's going to make or break the debate, circle it because that's massive. Anything that's big enough for you to win the debate on, you should circle that. It just helps you to emphasize what's important. So again, this point wasn't responded to by the opposition. You know that because there's no arrow leading from it to the opposition to speech, which is why it's circled. Now the third speaker knows to go to this point and spend most of their time on it because it's unresponded to, meaning it's probably one of the strongest points that proposition has. To highlight something reminds you to emphasize on it. If there's something that your opponents spend a lot of time responding to, that probably means it's something they're going to win on, which means you should emphasize it. Now, you can remind yourself to do a whole host of things when you highlight something. You can remind yourself to speak slower, to repeat really important things, to spend more time on something, or to use examples or connect with the judge in other ways. By highlighting something, you know you're going to emphasize it, and then you use a lot of rhetorical devices in order to actually emphasize them. Colors. You should be using different colors when presenting your points, which makes it easier to track the different sides and different speakers. It also allows you to be a lot more organized. Oftentimes, the entire flow sheet is going to be crammed with a lot of different words. Having different colors allows you to easily identify what each speaker said. So generally, we're going to split the colors by side, with proposition in blue and opposition in red. This makes it really easy to draw arrows, highlight your points, and find refutes. In the middle of debate, you're not going to be scrounging around for the piece of paper where you wrote a specific thing. Rather, you can easily identify it with the different colors. So again, proposition is either in black or dark blue, and opposition is in red here. Some other tips. When flowing, make sure you're not writing down every single thing. Just as you're not going to write down word for word what the teacher says in their lecture, you're also not going to do that in a debate to your opponents. Rather, you're going to summarize what they said. Use abbreviations. They say the United States federal government, don't write that down word for word, just write USFG. If they write because, don't write the entire word, just write BC dot. Use abbreviations. Also, try to summarize what they're saying. If they say raising the minimum wage will increase the amount of money people are going to be paid, which means people are richer and can afford more things, you can literally write raising minimum wage equals more money equals better QOL, standing for quality of life. Try to summarize things down as much as possible so you're saving your own time. You can also flow on online or paper. Both are pretty similar, and it's really up to personal preference as to which one you are better at. Personally speaking, I like flowing on paper, but lots of people like flowing online as well. The main idea is, at least if you're taking notes in debates and flowing key points, that's more than enough. Flowing and preparing your speeches. Remember that you should be flowing every single speech. Even if you're the proposition first speaker, you should still be flowing the later speeches in debate. This is because you need to be pausing your partner's stuff that can help them in the middle of their speeches. For example, you can give them key refutes, you can tell them which points were unresponded to, or things that'll help you win the debate. Also, flowing your opponent's speech and preparing your own speech goes hand in hand. Let's say you're the proposition's second speaker. By flowing what the opposition first speaker says, you're able to better understand their arguments, and you also know the order in which they went in, which you can use to help guide your own speeches. The best debaters out there are going to use their opponent's arguments and turn them into their own arguments. Multitasking. Using all the flowing tips we covered will help you be a lot more efficient and give you more time to prepare your speeches. You can also practice giving speeches only from a few bullet points. Keep in mind that when you're giving an actual speech during a debate, you shouldn't be reading from a piece of paper or reading from your table that you made during your case or during preparing your case. Rather, you should be reading from your flow or the bullet points you have prepared there. That will make it just a lot faster, as you won't need to write down every word of your speech beforehand, and you'll know how to summarize things from a pre-made bullet list. If you're speaking next, you can also ask your partners to help you flow or prepare parts of your speech. Remember, you have two teammates with you. Have one of them, for example, come up with responses to your opponent's case, and have the other one highlight certain parts of your own case that'll help you win the debate. Remember, 3 brains are better than 1. And finally, keep on practicing. Practice makes perfect, and no one is perfect at flowing when they start out. It will take you a lot of debates to hone in this art. And here are a few more examples of flow sheets, and there will be links to these examples in the description of this video. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a nice day.